You know, it's interesting now because a lot of the kids these days look back to, you know, Dorian's era and your era, and they say that your bodies look better than the guys do nowadays. And there's this interesting, you know, kind of a throwback to where they're like, man, maybe these guys were the peak of the game as opposed to nowadays. What are your thoughts on that? I know that, you know, as humans, styles always change. You know, you see music and hairstyles and fashion changes. So it's natural that, like you said, the judging of bodybuilding would change. But what do you think of the kids now looking back to those eras saying these guys were better looking than the current ones?
Well, you know something, it takes time to build a masterpiece. The era in which Dorian and I got our language of training from, we're from that of Arnold and Frank Zane and Robbie Robinson. Form, technique, training principles. Nothing was done overnight. It took time. I mean, I've seen pictures of Dorian when he was like 15 years old. Look how, you know, that amount of time that it was taking to develop his physique. I mean, I was lifting weights when I was 11 years old. Then by the time I was 16, I was competing in bodybuilding competitions. It takes time. What I see now in this era is a lot of the athletes, they train extremely heavy, too heavy, and the training principles in which they adhere to are not principles as it relates to building quality. You know, you see some of these training approaches now where a guy may train once every 7th day. So what in the world is that? And when you look at the physiques on the stage, you see the results of that. You don't see definition as much, or muscle separation, or muscle maturity. It takes time to get muscle maturity. One of my favorites, a guy named Albert Beckles, and we talked earlier, Albert is from Great Britain. Listen, when I won my second Mr. Olympia in Belgium in 1985, Albert was 56 at the time. Wow. 56 years young. He looked absolutely incredible, placing second to me. He would have gotten me if I hadn't been in the tip-top shape. But even at the age of 31, when I had retired, I never reached the pinnacle of muscle maturity like Albert Beckles because I was in and out of the game. Well, Albert was still competing when he was in his 60s and looking incredible. It takes time to build a masterpiece. It takes the proper training principles. And to train once every 7th day or once every 5th day, it's ridiculous. Those are the training routines of power lifters who need the extra time for heavy weight training. And if you did more than that, more than 7 days within muscle groups, you can end up with a lot of injuries, which is now taking place with a lot of athletes in our sport, whereby with the 3-on-off-1 or the straight 6, which is a little bit, as I said earlier, tends to overtrain the body a bit. But of course, during Arnold's era, that's what they did. But at the same token, they didn't train as heavy. They trained more frequently, but not as heavy. The 3-on-off-1 give you an ability to sort of train a slightly heavy and still at the same time give the body the extra recovery time. So the lack of the proper routines, the lack of proper training principles is caused the physiques of today to be bigger but lack quality. You see a lot of guys look like mutants. When during the course he was a mass monster, and then as you saw Ronnie as mass and Jay Cutler, you still didn't look like a mutant. You know, things were still proportionate. It was larger, but Dorian physique still had the symmetry and the balance to it. See, that's what you don't see now. You'll see guys with little calves, big thighs. You see a guy with huge shoulders, but then narrow width or high lats, because the ability or the tools or the knowledge to develop a complete physique with everything where it's supposed to be, long lats, full calves, are not there in the training principles that we adhere to growing up. Totally different, which also, Brian, is why I wrote this book here called Totally Awesome. I published this book in 1986. I did it again in 1991 after my last Olympia. And I recently did it again last year. Reason being is the lack of proper training information that's out there. I talked about the 3 on off one. Why is it better? Why is it better than a straight 7? I talk about the straight 6 and when to use it and then when to back away. I talk about a 3-day power circuit as to the benefits of it. After your body's gone through a competition, it's been traumatized, let's give it enough time to recover. That then and only then should a once every 7-day routine be used, not as a regular part of your daily training. So that's how a lot of these guys get so mixed up, because they follow a lot of these so-called gurus and coaches on the internet who haven't won the Creekwater USA or the Creekwater Great Britain yet. And they adhere to these judges. I mean, these coaches who don't know diddly squat.